Hey everyone, Heather here, and in today's video, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on A Realm Reborn, the first chapter installment of Final Fantasy XIV. If you're new here, I started playing Final Fantasy XIV for the first time in May of this year, 2022, and I played through all of the MSQ of Final Fantasy XIV from A Realm Reborn through the end of Endwalker in 2 months because I couldn't get enough of the story. And just to give you some background on what I was expecting out of the experience, I played most of the thing single player. I was playing mostly for the story aspect. Also, I just finished New Game Plus for A Realm Reborn and the patch content all the way to the beginning of Heavensward last night. So in this video, I guess you can kind of see it as my review. I'm going to be talking about my impressions of A Realm Reborn, things I missed the first time I played, some story highlights, and then also whether I think that new players should skip A Realm Reborn or not. In my next video, I am going to do a talk about the characters of A Realm Reborn. I had to just separate it out, otherwise I think this video would have been super long. So if you're interested in what I think about the characters of A Realm Reborn, stay tuned for that. Also, here is your spoiler warning. If you haven't finished all of A Realm Reborn, including the patch content all the way up until the very beginning of Heavensward, you probably want to skip this one until you catch up, but you can also use the timestamps in the pinned comment to jump around to different sections of this video. With that said, let's get into it. Let's start with my overall impression. So I touched on this on my review video, the first video I uploaded on this channel, but my expectations when it came to Final Fantasy XIV were very low. I knew nothing of Final Fantasy XIV, nothing. I hadn't heard anything, I hadn't seen any reviews. I was also very hesitant to play an MMO, so I guess you can kind of see it as like it was like pulling teeth to get me to finally play this game. And I guess the reason why I'm saying that is because I kind of went into the story very, very skeptical. Looking back, A Realm Reborn felt very, shallow. It felt very superficial, especially knowing what comes after. It felt very focused on politics and war and, alliance leaders and us versus the Garlean Empire, and that's really the only thing that matters. Like, yes, there's the primal threat, but it kind of felt like the biggest threat was the Garlean Empire. Everything was kind of around that. It also felt very errandy and questy. Felt very like, get this thing, bring it to this NPC, now bring this to another NPC and go here to there to here to there, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that definitely is something that stands out when I think back to A Realm Reborn. Was just like, it felt very much like I was kind of doing errands for people, especially since back then I didn't know the context of Oliver Bentley, right? Like, my Warrior of Light. I kind of just show up and everyone starts telling me what to do. After finishing New Game Plus, I'm actually surprised at how much of the story stuck with me. Like, even the little smaller details, I thought I was only going to kind of remember the, kind of the overall plot points, especially since it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of storytelling in Final Fantasy XIV. I really thought I wouldn't have remembered like all these little things that happened. And I actually can't believe how much content is in the patch content of A Realm Reborn. It really did feel like another expansion. Like, there's A Realm Reborn and then there's like the patch content. In terms of story, I just remember thinking like, okay, yeah, this is a Final Fantasy game. It just, I don't know, I guess it didn't stand out, right? Like, it was just as enjoyable as any other Final Fantasy game. It wasn't enough to be like, okay, this game is bad, I'm going to stop playing. But it obviously, wasn't enough for me to be like, this is the best game ever. So I kept playing, but also I wasn't as invested as I eventually did get further along in Final Fantasy XIV. Next, let's jump into my favorites. So first up is my favorite boss. My favorite boss was definitely Garuda. I felt like as a primal, she really stood out because Ifrit kind of felt very Ifrit-ish. Like, it reminded me of, the first part of Final Fantasy VIII, where I think the first, I forgot what they're called in Final Fantasy VIII, but the first thing that you meet in Final Fantasy VIII, I think, is Ifrit when you're like doing that little student seed test thing. And then there was Titan, which was a really cool boss battle. It felt different. It felt like, okay, I actually have to pay attention, and there's like markers on the floor that I need to look out for. And the music, I remember the music in that level standing out to me because I was like, whoa, this is like, you know, loud. But Garuda was really one that stood out to me because even though she was a primal, she stood out to me as being the most intelligent. Like, she had her own thoughts. She communicated it. It wasn't just like, I am a monster, hear me roar kind of thing. I feel like she embodied a primal, but then also had that sentience, right? It's not just something that was conjured out of thin air, but this is a primal that is also aware of what it really means to now exist physically in the world. And that boss battle was super fun. I'm pretty sure I got blown off, or, you know, I didn't it was my first time, so I didn't hide behind the boulder and got knocked off. Okay, favorite zone is definitely Mordona. I mean, the one thing I remember doing early on with Final Fantasy XIV is being very observant with the maps and the zones, because I remember from when I played World of Warcraft way back in the day, I remember one of my favorite things to do was to like walk my character through the zones and look at everything, because everything did feel very vast. And I also got that sense playing Final Fantasy XIV. Everything is so thought out, and you can really get a sense of the world of Eorzea. Like, I really felt that. But Mordona stood out to me because, like, if I could visit a zone in real life, it would totally be Mordona. It felt like Mordona had a backstory because it looked different than any other place. And when you find out why it's all covered in crystal and the land's all jagged and, like, you know, coming up against each other, it looks like there was some kind of earthquake or disaster or something like that. And then there's like the ruins of the ship and Midgard Sormer, and you can see like his skeleton wrapped around the ship. Like, I love things where you can get a sense of the history of what happened here. Like, it makes it feel very like, I don't know what the word is, like, whoa. And I also really liked Revenant's Toll. I really felt that adventure hubness, not just like a player hub, right? Like, where a lot of players gather, but in the game as an adventure hub of, like, because of where Mordona is located, you know, a lot of adventurers come through here. And then of course there's that part of Revenant's Toll that has like all the stalls, like all the NPCs where you can buy stuff and turn stuff in and all of that. And it felt like, oh wow, there's so much more to offer. Like, this game has so much more to offer here. Definitely, if I can hang out somewhere in the game, it would be Mordona, because I feel like all the people coming through would have like such crazy stories to share. I would totally hang out at that bar, like right in front of the Rising Stones. That would be my hangout. Like, I would just hang out there. I'd probably work there, you know, I'd be the bartender at that bar. I actually remember being scared to go into Castrum Sentry, and I think because, if I can remember correctly, that's the first time where you have to like infiltrate a Garlean, you know, post. And I remember like going through the doors, the sliding doors, and thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna aggro all of the enemies here. They're gonna see me. I'm just walking right through. And I had my hand on the sprint button, like ready if I needed to run. My favorite dungeon was Hawk Manor. And that's because I don't know, I really felt like I remember it so vividly. I think because I was playing it late at night and I was actually scared. Like, I was like here in my office, you know, it was dark. And I was going through Hawk Manor, and then there's all this buildup of like, yeah, there was this lady, she's abducting women and like doing weird stuff, and, you know, there's ghosty ghosts. It's not just Garlean spies, but there's like different kinds of scarier enemies in this manor. And I did it with NPCs, so I'm DPS, I'm Dragoon. So when I play with other people, the tank always goes first, but, you know, the NPCs will wait for me to go first. So that was like I was even more nervous because it was like I'm the one who had to turn the corner first. My favorite solo duty is, well, okay, so I'm biased because as of me doing New Game Plus, the Steps of Faith is now a solo duty. It used to not be. And that was so fun. Like, that was so fun because, like, the Scions are with you, Lucia's with you. I love the duties where, like, you're playing with the main NPC characters. It's like the closest thing that I can feel where I'm in the same party with the characters I love so much. So that was super fun. But pre that becoming a solo duty, like the first time I played A Realm Reborn, the one that stuck out to me was the fight with Ritatin, not Nero, not Livia, but the other guy in Gaius' little posse. That fight was one that really stuck out to me because it was the first time where he had so many forms, right? Like, you take him down and then his little buddies come in and then you have to deal with them, and then he like evolved again and then you have to take him down again. And I didn't have my NPC buddies since it was a solo duty, so it definitely, like, I got that sense of, oh my gosh, am I gonna be enough to take this guy down? Is he gonna stay down? He just kept getting up. So that one was one where I was definitely smiling by the end of finishing that duty. That was super fun. Next up, favorite line. So this one was really tough, and I think this is going to get even more tough as I go through and make videos about the future, expansions of the game. But I narrowed it down to 3. This line cracked me up even the first time I played it. This is where you have to psych up the recruits, and then you go up to this Lalafell and they're like, yeah, I break my fast on Garleans and right now I'm very hungry. I don't know why I got such a kick out of that. There's also this scene where you are trying to find Wedge during the Crystal Tower series, and he's like in this hut, like hiding out, and he's super scared, and we catch him. And then he goes, is it really you? How did you find me? Can you smell fear? And that just made me laugh so hard. And then he's like, oh, never mind that smell. I think that's what he says next. Yeah, ignore that smell. So I know as I play through the rest of Final Fantasy XIV, not all of the lines and quotes I save are just going to be the funny ones. But when I was playing New Game Plus, these are the ones where I was like cracking up out loud. So this is when we are about to realize that the Moogle King is a primal, right? Good King Mogglmog. And just the way that Kuplo Cop talks about him, where he like under his breath says some kind of praise about him and then continues on with his description of the situation. It's just so funny to me. So, like, I'm just going to scroll through it. Here he is, like, good King Mogglmog the 12th, may his glorious name live forever. But good King Mogglmog the 12th, may his miraculous foresight ever be praised. And then good King Mogglmog the 12th, may his courageous sacrifice never be forgotten. Good King Mogglmog the 12th, may his boundless grace fill our hearts with love. Like, it just goes and goes, and it's just, I wish that this part could have been voiced because I think it would have been hilarious. Favorite non-voiced NPC, Shomani Lomani, hands down. Such a character that stood out to me even the first time I played it, but I'll save my reason why for when I do my character breakdown of the characters in A Realm Reborn. So stay tuned for that. Now let's talk about story highlights. So actually, before I do that, let me show you something. This is my spreadsheet system that I created when I got my PlayStation 5 because I've been recording everything as I play through New Game Plus. So I have like every quest, a summary of that quest, any other notes or ideas for videos. It's been so much fun, but yeah, there's a lot. So I want to say that level 1 to 30-ish of A Realm Reborn felt very tutorial-y. Like you're getting a sense of what the gameplay is going to be like in Final Fantasy XIV. You're a new adventurer, you're getting to know the world, stuff like that. And it wasn't until Livia invaded the Waking Sands where I actually started paying attention. This is when the stakes finally feel high. This is when I actually felt something for the characters because I was I was livid at Livia. I was really sad for Neuraxia, who is the sylph who just got there. Like, they volunteered to be the representative for the sylphs as a scion of the Seventh Dawn, and boom, like they're just gone. That sucked. I felt so bad. And because it like took me so off guard, I was more mad at Livia than Gaius, you know, like Livia felt like the threat to me that we needed to take down, which is funny because they're not really like the main the main villain. This is also the time where I found myself starting to check the dialogue outside of the main story quest. Like if the NPCs would just be standing around the Waking Sands, I would want to know what they said, even though they didn't have like the quest icon. Bringing Out the Dead, that quest where you have to literally, you know, move the dead bodies of the scions to the caravan that's going to take them to the cemetery. Like, dang, that was dark, right? Like that that felt really dark to me. Just like, it's not something I would think that any game would bother to highlight, let alone let you do as a quest. It really made the whole event, like that whole quest, that whole chapter, it made me care about what was happening, right? Because it's like, I don't know, it's just it was an interesting way to make that situation more interactive, or like now I'm having to deal with the aftermath, and then having to bring back Neuraxia's body to the sylphs. Like that just broke my heart. I felt all kinds of things because it's like, you know, we had to go through all this trouble to convince the sylphs that, you know, they should team up with us. And so many of the sylphs were like, no, we're not going to hang out with you wingless ones because we've seen how weird you can be. And then we rescue Frixio, which is their leader, and she gives us a chance. And then Neuraxia comes over and, you know, everything is good. But then now we're having to go back after pleading with them and convincing them that, yes, you can trust us to do the thing that needs to be done. Join our side. I promise, like, we can win. And then now we're delivering Neuraxia's body to them. Like, it's just, oh my God. If there was anything to make them question their decision for, you know, banking on us, that was it. The first time we meet Marquez, I was very excited because I was so sure that that was Cid. And like, you know, when I play every single Final Fantasy game, I'm always looking out for Cid, Biggs, and Wedge. Like, who are they going to be? How are they going to play a part in the story? It's definitely like a little Easter egg for me as a Final Fantasy fan. One thing that I really remember, like, this is probably the first time where I felt sadness. Like, I was sad when the whole Waking Sands thing happened with Livia, but I was really sad with the whole sentient Reaver thing. So the sentient Reaver, I don't think I understood why it had become sentient the first time I played it. Like, I knew it became that, but I didn't understand it was because we had put a mammoth heart in it, and now that I have my own island sanctuary and the mammoths are like helping me take care of my island, I was like, oh, okay, so we have a heart of one of these guys, and that's what makes it sentient in the Reaver. But when we had to leave the Reaver behind in the Praetorium, I was actually sad. I was like, man, we built this thing from scratch, like it wanted to be a part of our team, and now we just have to like sacrifice it and then leave it there. Thank goodness, you know, it ended up like picking us up, and then it became my favorite mount for so long because I got attached to it. And speaking of the Praetorium, I actually remember my first time in the Praetorium. This was definitely one of those dungeons where I looked up a guide because I had to play with other people, and I was scared to play with other people. I didn't want to mess up. And I remember reading like, oh yeah, when you go to try to defeat Gaius, like his little soldiers are going to do X things, and you have to like not stay in the like line of where they're going to attack. And I remember just like, oh my gosh, are they about to do the X thing? Like, I remember moving my camera to check, and it was so cool that you had to get into the Reaver and like drive this thing as part of the dungeon. I actually remember that being really cool. Next up, Operation Archon. So that actually felt very high stakes to me, and I felt because they explained it so well. Like, I remember them showing a cutscene of the map and like where all the Garlean posts were, like all the different castrums and who was in charge of attacking what. Like that actually made sense to me, and it felt like, okay, I'm part of a plan and everyone has a role, and I'm excited to see this thing through to the end. I think that was the first time in A Realm Reborn where I felt that. And then when the Scions decide to move from the Waking Sands to the Rising Stones, I actually felt part of the team. Like I wasn't just this hired adventurer that was good at what I'm doing, so now I'm just gonna go over here because these people want to recruit me. But like, no, I have a seat at the table. I'm going to help this organization grow. I have a role to play, and I am equal to the other Scions in terms of like my capabilities and what I'm contributing. Friends, I guess, right? Like it finally felt like not just a team, but there was a friendship there that I actually felt like was reciprocated. One of my favorite scenes in A Realm Reborn is a scene where Nanamo Merlveb and Kane Senna are talking in Nanamo's room about her decision to dissolve the monarchy and then make Ul'dah a republic. I really loved that scene. Like I just remember feeling so interested in their conversation because these are alliance leaders, right? Like these are leaders of nations, but I think anyone can resonate with, like, even though you may be the leader and everyone looks to you for answers, I think every leader also needs peers to be able to, you know, confide in, bounce ideas off of, get feedback. And just to see these like three women lean on each other, and they all are in that similar role so they can understand each other in a way that no one else can. I love that. Everyone should have that, right? Like regardless of your role or your job or, you know, your friend circle, like in real life, I feel like everyone should have a group of peers where you can have a mutual sense of trust, where you can be real and not fear resentment or embarrassed, right? Like if you can't truly vocalize your feelings, then it's hard for someone to give you actual, insightful, helpful feedback. But then also if you're not willing to do that, like if there's no mutual trust, that just doesn't happen. And I feel like as I've gotten older, it's actually really hard to find that, especially for me, where I work for myself, right? So my husband is kind of my coworker, but like it's important to me to have people where there is a mutual respect, a mutual sense of admiration and trust, because I feel like it makes the whole team stronger. It's cool to see that, you know? Now, the banquet, right? A Realm Reborn's version of the Red Wedding. That was definitely unexpected. I mean, compared to the rest of the story of Realm Reborn, that really stood out like, oh, okay. We've got betrayal.
It was me.
We've got murder. This is not just us versus Gaius, who's not even like really in the story, and whenever he is, he's just like laughing about his new toys and stuff. But this is like, no. These are people we were supposed to have trusted, and there's been this whole plot that's been going on forever against us, and we're the good guys. That's when everything shifts. It's definitely a perfect setup for Heaven's Ward, especially with Alphino, which again, I'm gonna save that for another video. I have a lot to say about Alphino in A Realm Reborn. Next up is what I missed the first time I played A Realm Reborn. So the first thing that confused me when I was playing A Realm Reborn was the Company of Heroes, because I thought that the Company of Heroes were the 5 heroes that like everyone forgot about. For some reason during the calamity, right? Like there's these 5 mysterious heroes that nobody could remember who they were for some reason. And I thought that those 5 heroes were the 5 company of heroes that we were now having to like go around and find. Playing it back again in New Game Plus, it makes sense, but playing it as a new player where everyone is a new character, and you know, I don't understand the importance of things, and I'm still getting to know everybody. Like it was just a lot of characters. That actually brings me to my next point with the Crystal Braves. There's no way I could remember who was who. And now that I've played it over again, oh my gosh, like I didn't understand that the Crystal Brave that had been murdered was Wilred, which, gosh, that's dark, right? This 18-year-old young person who was so passionate about trying to get back at the Garlean Empire that he himself tried to summon. I think it was Ralgar he was trying to summon. Like, he was so dedicated and determined that he was willing to do this, and then realizing that, okay, that's not the way to go about it, but here's this new venture that is supported by the Eorzean Alliance that I can be a part of. And he's like, you know, when you talk to Wilred, he's like super into it, super passionate. Everyone recognizes his enthusiasm, and then he's the one who gets murdered. Like, that hits so much harder the second time I played it than the first time, because I think I kept getting confused with Ilbred and Wilred. Like, their names sounded similar, and I was just, you know, I was kind of getting confused. Like, it's someone in a blue uniform. I understand they're Crystal Brave, but I can't remember like who is who and what their backstory is. I also didn't realize that the end of A Realm Reborn was where they declare the end of the 7th Umbral Era. Like, that's why it's called A Realm Reborn.
The 7th Astral Era is come! And thus is ours A Realm Reborn!
I knew that, I remembered that, but it hits different the second time I play it when I understand like what an Umbral Era is and an Astral Era and all of that. There was a roar at the end of the ceremony that everyone was like, oh, that's Bahamut.
What was that? That roar. It can't be. Did you hear that?
But that never ended up coming back as far as I know. Someone said online that was like Bahamut in the coils of Bahamut, which I haven't played yet. But yeah, it was kind of like, why is that roar there if you keep playing through the patch content? Like, it's never mentioned again. The one thing I wish about A Realm Reborn is that we got more of Minbrita, which I'm not going to go super into it because I'm going to save that for the character video. But like, I can't believe that she's only in the patch content. Like, she's not even in in A Realm Reborn proper, and then she does not make it to Heavensward. And I felt like her character was so cool, and it sucks that she was just like gone so fast. So like I said, I'm actually surprised at how much I remember, especially going through New Game Plus and doing my second playthrough. But that being said, I can see how it is a barrier to entry for a lot of people, which brings me to my next point. Would I suggest people skip A Realm Reborn if they are new to Final Fantasy XIV? So I'm relatively new, remember, like I am still a sprout in terms of the Final Fantasy XIV community, and I get the impression that to skip A Realm Reborn or to not skip A Realm Reborn is a hot topic. So I'm just going to chime in and share my thoughts on this. As someone who was primarily looking for a single player experience with a good story, I have no regrets playing A Realm Reborn. I'm so glad I did. And obviously it got me invested enough where I blasted through the rest of Final Fantasy XIV in 2 months. That being said, I do think that there is an undeniable level up between A Realm Reborn and Heavensward. Even when Emmerich is introduced, like, his voice acting is superb. It totally stands out from the voice acting in A Realm Reborn.
Gaius van Belsar is dead, and the legion of conscripts he left behind lacks the will to fight. We think it highly unlikely that they will emerge from behind the walls of their castra for some time.
Everything about Final Fantasy XIV definitely levels up in Heavensward forward. So many things about A Realm Reborn seem so crucial. Like, I can't imagine not knowing what we learn in A Realm Reborn and then having the story of Final Fantasy XIV still having the same impact on me. But I realized that A Realm Reborn is super long. Like, A Realm Reborn is long, and then the patch content of A Realm Reborn is long. So it is going to take you like at least 50 hours, maybe 40, maybe, if you play super, super fast and ignore all side quests and all of that to get to Heaven's Ward. And I understand the backstory and the development of A Realm Reborn. I've watched the No Clip documentary, and I have so much admiration for the team that put together A Realm Reborn. Like, it's an incredible journey that they had to go through. So here's what I'll compare it to. The Yakuza series. The Yakuza series is like an action RPG series that's been out for a very, very, very long time. I think they're already on their 7th installment, but there's also like spin-offs and prequels and all of that. The first entry for me to the series was actually the most recent one, which is technically Yakuza 7, and it's called Yakuza Like a Dragon. I knew absolutely nothing about Yakuza. Like, I say that I knew nothing about Final Fantasy XIV, but I knew it was a Final Fantasy game. So because I've played many of the Final Fantasy series, a lot of it, like I had expectations. But with Yakuza, I seriously knew nothing. I didn't know what the main character's name was. I didn't know anything. And Like a Dragon is one of my favorite games. Like, I had so much fun playing that game. So much so that it made me want to play the rest of the series. And I remember Googling, like, oh, if you're trying to get into the Yakuza series because you played Like a Dragon, where should you start? Should you start at Yakuza 1 like everybody else did? Should you start with the prequel? Because even though it came out later, chronologically, it happens before, it happens at the beginning of the whole timeline. I decided to play Yakuza 0 next. And oh my gosh, I actually liked that game more than Like a Dragon. The story is so good. Like, can we take a side note? If you are looking for a very good single player story, Yakuza 0, please play it. Like, it's so absolutely amazing. But my point is that despite how little I knew and know of the Yakuza series, Yakuza 0 was strong enough to hold on its own. Even if you didn't continue with the rest of the Yakuza series, you will still have had a blast playing Yakuza 0. You don't need the rest of the other games to kind of validate the story that is Yakuza 0, the story that is this prequel. You don't need any other context. Of course, if you had other context, it's going to hit differently. It's going to be more impactful. But like, even if all you played was Yakuza 0, it's going to be a damn good game. That's what I wish for Realm Reborn, because I feel like if someone only played A Realm Reborn, like, I would feel like they're missing out on what is the essence of Final Fantasy XIV. I feel like if you only played A Realm Reborn, you are missing out, right? Like, you're not really getting to what Final Fantasy XIV has to offer. That's the part where I'm like, okay, I wouldn't recommend skipping A Realm Reborn, but I see why people do. I would be very curious at the team that is Final Fantasy XIV revisiting A Realm Reborn, having the experience that they do now. The team that now has the experience of A Realm Reborn, Heaven's Ward, Stormblood, Shadowbringers, and Endwalker revisiting A Realm Reborn and seeing what they could do with it, right? Like, you're not having to start from scratch, number one. And then number two, you have all of this experience and all of this like knowledge of the community and like you're not having to establish a new precedent of what Final Fantasy XIV is. It has been established. And so like bringing all that to the table and revisiting A Realm Reborn, I feel like there is a way to make it so that it can be strong enough to stand on its own, and then also give all the necessary plot points that a new player would need to proceed with the rest of the story. If you play through A Realm Reborn now in the state that it's currently in, with the knowledge or approach of like, this is a prequel to the rest of Final Fantasy XIV, it really like it I don't know, it makes so much more sense to me like that. My second playthrough was definitely way more impactful, especially playing through all of Final Fantasy XIV, than the first time I played it. Everything does hit differently when you know the story that is Final Fantasy XIV and then play A Realm Reborn as a prequel, right? Like, I feel like there would be more appreciation for all the little story beats there because you know the greater context and the importance of like every single thing that is happening versus you don't know anything that's happening because the entire world is new. All the characters are new. You're still figuring out everything. Like, everything is new and overwhelming that like you don't know what is truly important, what to focus on. But then when you have that context, I feel like everything takes on a different meaning. Obviously, I know it's different because A Realm Reborn wasn't actually made as a prequel, and Yakuza 0 is actually a standalone game. But it does seem like the biggest barrier to entry for new players to Final Fantasy XIV isn't money, since A Realm Reborn and Heaven's Ward are free, but time. It just takes so many hours for a brand new player to really feel that irresistible story that Final Fantasy XIV is known for. So I do think it would be worth a revisit. I really do think it would bring in a whole new audience to Final Fantasy XIV, especially if it's optimized for the single player experience. So I hope you enjoyed this part 1 of my thoughts on A Realm Reborn. Stay tuned for part 2 where I talk about all the characters in A Realm Reborn. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!